Hey guys, it's Hunter, and I will be explaining the Persian Gulf War, which was a conflict in the early 1990s between Iraq, Kuwait, and many members of the UN. So, what was the Persian Gulf Crisis? On August 2nd, 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Kuwait had very little military strength, and within 12 hours, pretty much all of Kuwait was occupied. Iraq justified their reasons for invading in many ways. Back in 1756, during the Ottoman Empire, Iraq owned Kuwait, and the Ottoman Empire promised Iraq they would always own Kuwait. But when British freed Kuwait from Iraq in 1961, Iraq was upset and has always maintained that was an unlawful thing to do and went against the Ottoman Empire. Also, Iraq accused Kuwait of slant drilling. This is when Kuwait would set up oil drills on the Iraq-Kuwait border and drill underground and into Iraq's oil reserves, although there has never been any evidence to support this claim. Also, Iraq and Kuwait have always had a border dispute, and Iraq probably thought they were taking back a portion of what they thought they already owned. Here's a picture of slant drilling, and as you can see, it's a pretty cheeky tactic. So, why was the invasion an international crisis? It's not that rare for nations to change hands, and I myself was surprised it caused such an international uproar. Well, the most important reason why the UN got involved was because Kuwait had such a weaker military than Iraq. In addition, there was no evidence that Kuwait was stealing Iraq's oil, and also the UN argued that the Ottoman Empire didn't have international say 250 years later. Here you can see how much smaller Kuwait is than Iraq. So, UN resolutions. There were around 9 significant resolutions passed by the UN regarding the Persian Gulf War. Each resolution was voted on by the Security Council, but during this conflict, resolutions were passed with little to no resistance. This war came soon after the Cold War, and the entire world wanted peace, so many actions were taken against Iraq quickly. Some of the most significant resolutions were 660, which 2 days after Iraq's invasion called for their withdrawal, Resolution 661, which froze all Iraqi assets in international banks, and Resolution 662, which canceled Iraq's annexation of Kuwait. Here is Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq during the time, and all consequences put into place against Iraq would cease when Iraq withdrew from Kuwait. Iraq never did withdraw during this time. Here's Resolution 660, and it says, the UN demands that Iraq withdraw from Kuwait immediately and unconditionally all its forces to positions in which they were located on August 1st, 1990. This basically is more of a threat than anything else, but it just shows that they condemn Iraq and they don't agree with the invasion. And the other probably the most important resolution was Resolution 678, which says, the UN authorizes member states to use all necessary means to uphold and implement Resolution 660 and to restore international peace and security in the area. There were several other resolutions of varying importance that ranged from releasing hostages to creating a naval blockade to even sending emergency food drops to citizens. This resolution was released on November 29, 1990, and it said that if Iraq did not withdraw from Kuwait by January 15th, a war would break out. Iraq did not leave, and Operation Desert Shield began at once. So, UN operations. On January 16, 1991, Operation Desert Shield started, which is a heavy aerial assault that obviously crippled Iraq, but they fought on and did not withdraw. And then later on February 24th, Operation Desert Saber started, which was a ground assault based out of Saudi Arabia. And within 4 days, all Iraqi forces were banished from Kuwait. So, was the UN effective? Yes. The UN was very successful because they did everything they could to encourage Iraq to leave Kuwait peacefully by creating many resolutions before resorting to violence. They also defended civilians by sending emergency food drops and by keeping the war brief. While Iraq was retreating, they set fire to all Kuwaiti oil drills, and the UN sent in teams of firefighters to fight them. Also, after the war, the UN made Iraq destroy all potential weapons of mass destruction and kept searching Iraq for years after the war. Here you can see all the oil drills that were set on fire. So, reasons for helping Kuwait. It was right for the UN to defend a weaker nation that had essentially done no wrong, or at least Iraq could prove that they had done no wrong. And also they were defending the world by making sure Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction. And this came right after the Cold War, so the entire world was on edge about like nuclear weapons. So USA and Britain bombing of Iraq. 7 years later, December 21st, 1998, the USA and Britain decided to bomb Iraq because they had resisted being searched for weapons of mass destruction, and they argued they had authority because of past resolutions, but no one really agreed with them among the UN, and although the UN lost moral high ground, Iraq did let them search for weapons of mass destruction, and it turns out they either weren't developing or weren't even close to developing any weapons of mass destruction, so the bombing wasn't really helpful. So some unanswered questions. And these are my works cited. I've been Hunter Moore, and I hope you really enjoyed the presentation.